So okay, so I was talking about Joe Brandt. Okay, so Joe Brandt gets this vision, and he was taken to Hollywood in his vision, and because he thought about it for a second for some reason, and then that's where he went, and he saw this quake basically hit, and he saw a lot of California basically dropping, and there's a lot of detail, but basically the bottom line is California, or a large part of it, had this gigantic quake. Buildings were coming down, and I mean tall buildings were coming down. Well-built buildings were coming down, screaming, and whatnot. The metal and the concrete and everything. And it's quite a story. And then but what he saw some things that at the time did not exist. He saw things off in the future. Small cars, people dressed a certain way, men dressed a certain way that never would have been dressed like that back then. And other things, that were tells about the time frame when this quake is going to hit. And there were stars on the Hollywood, sidewalks, right? There's stars on Hollywood Boulevard. I think maybe Sunset, but I think it's Hollywood Boulevard. But there were people on these stars. He didn't know any of these names. He was like, I don't know these people, And so anyway, so it was some time off in the future, and he said it was in the early spring, from what he could tell, because of the way that what he felt, what he sensed, or what he was given. And the one thing that he noticed something was missing, and at first he couldn't put his finger on it, but later he figured out there were no birds, and he thought that was really odd. And then some of the looks on the people's faces, he sensed that there was some kind of an oppression over these people, so looking around, in the time we're in now, is, you can see kind of that on people's faces, for many reasons. But so anyway, so that, getting back to Chuck, so he has this map, right? And so I'm starting to learn about Chuck and what he went through. He was early on. He was in the Indiana, Ohio area, Illinois area. He worked. I think he was working in Chicago, and that was when he received a vision of this quake that hits. And he was up in a building in the vision. He was actually working at the building when he had this open vision, and the building started shaking and rattling, and the sound was horrendous, and all this stuff happened. And then later he was on a road, and he saw a jet that didn't exist yet take off, or started to come in for a landing. And then it was coming in, and then it started to go into full throttle again, and try to get up, get some air, get some height, get some altitude, because it could see this wave coming from Lake Michigan. After it had gone north, this wave of water then began to rush back down, and the land tilted one way, and then it tilted another way, and all that water in Lake Michigan and Lake Superior and all of those lakes there just started rushing back down to the south. And he said that there was a whole lot of little towns all throughout there. St. Louis gets washed. All these towns south of Lake Michigan get pretty wiped out. So that's something to think about, And there are other people that have seen the reasons why this happens, and it has something to do with judgment on the United States because of us sticking our noses in the business of dividing up Israel. And the Lord, said, whoever touches this is the apple of my eye, and you'll be grinded to powder. So I guess we're involved in some division of Jerusalem and of Israel, so that between the people of Israel, Arabs and Israelis both, there's going to be this agreement made, which is going to be a big no-no. You don't want to touch this, but they do, and stupidly, and they probably are going to hail it as a great, wonderful peace agreement, but it's going to very quickly become a source of the execution of the judgment of the people that were involved. So that would be the United States, and that's one reason why this happens. So and that's what I've gathered from many other prophets, let's say, that have studied this and looked into this. Okay, so getting back to Chuck. So Chuck, he was at this this briefing, the Prophecy Club, and he went over all these different events. The Lord gave him a download of all these different events that were going to happen. But before he got into a little bit of his history, and in his history he tried to warn Jimmy Carter. Let me start further back. Okay, so he didn't know the Lord, but somebody was praying for him, and he ended up going to this little retreat, and he met the Lord, and the retreat was at a monastery. There were these monks and these very devout people, and Chuck, this was after he received the Lord, I think, and he was with his dad, I think, and he told his dad, he says, there's angels standing around. He could see these angels standing around, and the Lord was leading him and guiding him to this office that he was going to hold, being a prophet. And back in the 70s, late 70s, 79, the Lord had him warn Jimmy Carter in a letter that there was going to be this operation they were going to conduct, and if they went through with it, it was not going to be successful, and it was going to fail miserably. And he, certified it and all that, and sent it, and it got to the White House. He got his little receipt back saying it had arrived, and this was months before the event. So what happened was there was this huge cluster foxtrot out in the desert where the military had conducted this operation. They were going to go rescue the hostages in Iran that were being held there, and it was just a total fiasco. There was collisions of aircraft and all helicopters. A bunch of soldiers died, and it really was a bad mark on the United States militarily, and it really put the military in a funk and a dump, because I was in it at the time, and I remember it very well. And I had been in maybe a couple of years, and it was just a devastating blow to the morale. And then later, shortly after Ronald Reagan became president, there was some kind of deals going on back there behind the scenes, and the hostages were released, and America had regained some of its status in the world. But there was always this sort of taint on the morale of the military as a result of this. But because of what Ronald Reagan did with the military, he completely the whole structure and morale of the whole military just overnight sort of switched, and it became everybody started to kind of lift their heads up a little bit and everybody had some pride, and everybody was actually thankful they had a good leader. That was basically it. and somebody who was actually going to look out for their interests. And the United States military at that time became probably, if at that time, for a few years there was 10 or 12 years there, 15 years, where the United States military was no doubt pretty top notch. Okay, and he built this magnificent machine, and everybody was proud to be in it. Everybody was pretty happy about it. So, and fortunately, we never really went into any serious conflict with any other powers during that time. A large conflict like the ones that are currently pending on us right now. And if our country was in the state that it was in then, now, there would be a whole different aspect to this whole scenario that we're currently living through. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So we are in what we're in. I want to see if this thing's still going. It is. Okay. So anyhow, Chuck Youngbrandt. So he warned Jimmy Carter, and then he warned Ronald Reagan. And now the FBI was a little bit hip to Chuck Youngbrandt by now, because the things that he projected came to pass precisely as he said they would. And so now, when he sends them a letter or something, they listen, and they even sent a couple of agents to his house and talked to him about it. And then